Today we're diving into the world of spider plants, one of the most iconic and beginner-friendly houseplants out there. Spider plants, or Chlorophytum comosum, are native to tropical and southern parts of Africa. They're known for their arching leaves, which cascade beautifully, making them perfect hanging baskets or table plants. And did you know they make adorable baby plants called spiderettes that are easily propagated? There are many different varieties of spider plants. This one is a bonny spider plant or a curly spider plant. But like I said, there are lots of different varieties. And the good thing is they're all pet safe, so non-toxic to cats and dogs, although they are slightly hallucinogenic for cats. And they're also excellent air purifiers. With them being such popular houseplants, you can really find them everywhere for really affordable rates. I found this absolutely humongous, beautiful curly spider plant at a big box shop for around $20. I'll be sharing everything you need to know to keep your spider plant thriving, from light and watering needs to common problems and how to fix them. So I'll be using this one to demonstrate repotting and soil and all of the things that we'll be covering today. I'll have timestamps in my description below for you in case there's a certain section that you are interested in. So let's get started. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by RepotMe.com. With RepotMe, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. So most of the plants that we bring into our homes as houseplants are in fact tropical plants, and what makes certain plants so great as houseplants is how easily adaptable they are, and the spider plant is no exception to that. And they're very adaptable when it comes to lighting. So I'd recommend a bright indirect light. What does that mean? It means near the window but not in direct sunlight, specifically afternoon sunlight. Direct morning sunlight is fine. I say this all the time. You honestly want to go with more light rather than less light. The only reason why they say bright indirect light is to prevent afternoon sun beating down on the leaves and causing sunburn. So if you notice that's happening, just pull your plant away from the window a little bit, but you're way better off with more light rather than less light. Some things to look out for to know if your plant is getting enough light or not. If it's not, the leaves will start to fade a little bit, and especially the plants that have variegation, which the variegation is the white on the leaves. Variegated plants typically need more light than solid green leaved plants. So if you have a spider plant that's solid green, it can probably handle more lower light than the variegated version of it. However, both are pretty adaptable to lighting conditions. Another reason the spider plant is such a great houseplant is that the watering requirements are pretty easy. I say water this plant when it's about halfway to almost fully dry. They don't enjoy long periods of drought. It does start to affect the plant. You can see some browning on the tips of the leaves if it goes too long without watering. On the other side, it is a tropical plant, and it's not going to enjoy a lot of saturation around its roots, but we'll address that with soil, because that's really how you manage too much water retention for plants or overwatering, is with the soil, not necessarily with how much water you're actually giving your plant. But the other thing I would like to mention, I mean, it is straightforward. Just water it when it's about halfway dry. They're pretty easy with that kind of thing when it comes to watering. But I will say that these plants can be sensitive to chemicals in the water. So if you're noticing the browning tips on the leaves and your plant isn't going through long periods of drought, it could be a sensitivity to the tap water. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's just a little bit of browning on the tips of the leaves that you can like trim off if you want to. But if that does bother you, I would say switch to like a distilled water, or you can let your tap water sit out for 24 hours. That'll help some of the chemicals to evaporate. But if you're noticing browning on the tips, that's probably what it's from. Before I jump into repotting and soil and propagation and fertilizing, I do want to mention temperature and humidity. So these guys are really easy when it comes to humidity. Another reason why they're such a great houseplant, because they're not bothered if the humidity gets lower. However, in the winter time, if you're in a zone where you get very, very low humidity, you could provide a humidifier, a pebble tray, something like that. If you notice the leaves are getting extra crispy, that's usually a sign of needing more humidity, but they should be fine in most zones and in most areas. The other thing I would mention is temperature wise, The general rule of thumb is if you're comfortable in your home, your plants will be comfortable in your home. Again, this is a tropical plant, so anything over 65 degrees Fahrenheit will be fine for this one. But if you're comfortable, your plants should be as well. If you live in an area where it's very cold during the winter months, I always recommend moving your plants away from the window a little bit because the cold kind of coming off of your window can affect your plants. Another thing is if they're in a really drafty area, that can affect them. And it's primarily just during the winter months, taking a little extra precaution. And if you're noticing your spider plant or your tropical plants aren't putting out new growth during the winter months, just know that is totally normal because most of these tropical plants tend to go dormant in the winter anyways. Anytime I bring a plant home, I give it some time to adjust to its new environment. Usually takes a couple of weeks, you know, if they've just come from a greenhouse or something like that, they have to adjust to temperature, humidity, lighting. But then once they've adjusted, I always like to repot them. And I like to repot them into a correct soil that I know has proper drainage, which will help prevent root rot. And I also like to make sure I pot them up in a clear nursery pot, because this way I can keep an eye on the roots, I can keep an eye on the moisture, and then once it's done, that's it for the next couple of years, because especially spider plants, they enjoy being somewhat root bound. So I won't have to worry about this plant for probably another 2 years. So all of the products that I'm using today are with my partner Repot Me. I'm very, very proud to be partnered up with them. They're well known in the plant community. They have tons of houseplant supplies and orchid supplies delivered right to your door. They're amazing. So I'm a big fan of theirs, but pretty much all the products that I'm using today, you can find another version of that if that's what you prefer. So let's go ahead and get started. Look how amazing this plant is. I'm very, very curious to see what the roots are like. I didn't check the roots in the store, which I usually do. Now I like to use cover pots because the clear pot isn't exactly aesthetic, especially if you're wanting to use a hanging basket. So all you need to do is find a hanging basket or use a planter with a macrame hanger, and then just put this inside of your cover pot. How to tell if your spider plant needs to be repotted? Usually it's because you can see roots coming out the bottom of the plant. And just look how compact those roots are. And this plant has been loving that, but it is definitely ready for a little bit of a freshening up. I like to come up with names for my plants, and I think Bonnie is a perfect one for this plant, with it being a Bonnie spider plant. I think that's so cute. Start removing some of the old soil. Now you could take chopsticks in here and kind of get some of the more of the soil out. I'm just going to be loosening it up a little bit. I'm trying not to cause too much trauma to the roots, because if you cause a lot of trauma to the root system, the plant's going to be focusing on repairing the roots and not on new foliage growth, which is what we're looking for, is the foliage growth. And the new roots will navigate into the new soil. So I'm just going to loosen it up a little bit. Oh, another suggestion I have, which I didn't take my own advice this time, is to water your plants a few days before you repot them, because that will make the roots nice and kind of supple and firm. And when you repot them, they're less likely to rip, the roots are. First, let's pick out a pot. I'm going to go about 1 to 2 inches larger than the old pot. Well, that's a pretty good size. I want the plant to have some room to grow, the roots to grow, and I'm not going to be repotting again for probably at least two years or so. I'm really not going bigger than 2 inches larger than the last pot. And the reason for this is if there is too much room in the pot, the soil will become overly saturated and the roots won't have an opportunity to get the moisture out of the soil, and it'll just be too saturated. And it can lead to root rot, which is what we're trying to avoid. And then you can see all of the beautiful drainage holes on the bottom and even around the sides. Technically they're slotted orchid pots, but they're fabulous for tropical plants. Now, if you choose plastic or ceramic pots, just make sure they do have a lot of drainage holes. Now, some people enjoy terracotta. Terracotta does tend to dry out the soil faster because it wicks away moisture, which you would normally use for like cactus, succulents, that kind of thing. And this plant does not enjoy long periods of drought. So just make sure if you are using terracotta that you are watering your spider plant regularly and not allowing it to stay dried out for long periods of time. Now, it's very easy to make your own potting mix. You could use about 60% potting mix and then 40% some other substrate like perlite, pumice, orchid bark. You can put some worm castings in there for some fertilizer. There's all sorts of great stuff you can do. Primarily, you want to just make sure that you have enough drainage in the soil so that it doesn't get
bogged down with moisture, but you have enough potting mix in there to retain moisture. So you can have fun with it, get creative. I'm not big on like exact measurements, you know, just see how it goes based on what you have at your home. But if you do want an exact measurement, I'd say 60% potting mix, 40% other substrate for drainage. Today I'm using Spider Plant Imperial potting soil mix from the Repot Me website. I like to use customized soil blends. I have to say I'm pretty spoiled at this point. Having the opportunity to use a lot of these amazing custom soil blends that are made specifically for each individual plant. They have Monstera, snake plant, cactus succulent, spider plant. I could go on and on. It's definitely worth taking a look at, and you can get 10% off with my code Ashley. However, making your own soil works great too. There's lots of different options out there. But if I'm only repotting every couple of years, it's really nice to just know that my plant is in the best soil. So you can see here, it has a lot of potting mix in there to help retain moisture, but then it has all the other little bits and pieces to make sure that it's well draining enough. But I will say, looking at this compared to some of their other tropical soil mixtures, I can tell that this one is more for water retention, which makes sense because this plant doesn't enjoy long periods of drought. So that's pretty cool. There's activated charcoal in here. That's always nice to add in. You know, helps prevent fungus and bacteria and stuff from building up. Anyways, I'm gonna get started on the repotting. This plant is gonna be so beautiful as an addition to my collection. I'm so excited about it. I'm excited to do propagations on this one and to film it. Here's a little pro tip if you don't want to repot as soon as you bring your plant home. When you're shopping and you find a plant you like, take a look at the roots. Make sure there's enough room in that pot so you don't have to repot it very quickly. Again, I like repotting mine in the soil I prefer when I bring them home. Girl, you got a lot of hair. Okay. Give it a little shimmy. A little shimmy shimmy. The repotting is done. This plant is going to do amazing. So I'm not going to show it on here, but as soon as I'm done filming, I'm going to take it over to the sink and I'm going to just douse it with water. So because I have such a well-draining soil mixture, I don't have to worry about overwatering this plant anymore. And I can just give it a good drink because I can't really give it too much water because it has that well-draining soil mixture. You just want to watch out that if you do have a cover pot, you don't leave this plant sitting in the cover pot in water. And when the soil is fully saturated and you've given it a good drink, you want to wait until it's about 50% dry before you water it again. But every time you water it, you just want to like soak her with water and let her get a really, really good drink. Huh, Bonnie? Yeah, she's so cute. You can use a typical just houseplant fertilizer. You can use any fertilizer of your choosing as long as it says for houseplants on there. It should be great. Here are two from the Repot Me website that I really, really love. They're specifically for houseplants. This is the organic one that's used with like fish emulsion, and then this one is the synthetic. Both are fabulous. I will say that the organic one does have a slight fishy scent to it, but it goes away after about a day. So with that, you'll just mix it with water, make sure you follow the instructions, start at 50% strength during the very beginning of spring, and then if your plant does okay with it, then do full strength all through the summer months through the beginning of fall, tapering off in the fall, and then not fertilizing at all during the winter months, unless you're seeing a lot of growth on your plant in the winter months. And then at that point, I would just fertilize it very sparingly at 50% during the winter months. Last up is propagation, which I'm really excited about. The easiest way to propagate is using one of these really cute little baby spider plants or spiderettes or pups. And you want to choose one that has some decent roots on it already. So you see how this one has like a really good root system already. This one is okay. Let me see. You know, there's a lot of them. And yeah, that's how they just grow their own individual plants with roots already. So there are two different ways you can do it. You can either just trim it off the little umbilical cord here where it's attached, just trim it there, and you can pot it up in soil. as long as it has really good roots already, or you can put it in water and let those roots really continue to grow. And then once it has a ton of roots, then repot it, which is what I would recommend doing. And you just want to trim it off here. You can see where I trimmed it right here off of the plant, and then all of these are roots. So this is a really great one to start with. Now, this one would probably be okay planted in soil because it does have some roots already. You just want to make sure that if you have it potted up in soil for your propagations, and really for all propagations, you don't want to let the soil dry out. New propagations really need moisture consistently at all times. So some people will put it in a little dome to help retain the moisture. I'm gonna go the water route because I actually want it to get more roots and a more substantial root system before I pot it up into soil, knowing that I'm probably a little bit of a chronic underwaterer. I'm not on top of watering like I should be, and I won't have to worry about that in the water. This is just standard tap water. You could use distilled water. Again, these plants can be somewhat sensitive to minerals and chemicals in the tap water, but again, it really just makes browning on the tips of the leaves, which is, it's fine. I don't have any distilled water on hand. Here's another one, so cute. This is the last one. You can see the little roots. Look how cute that is. And these are actually really, really fast. Like some plants take a while to root, but from everything I can tell, these are exceptionally fast growing. So in about a month, I would say, this thing should be full up of roots, and I can easily repot it at that time. Bonnie, your babies are going to be in such good hands and so cute. And you can just leave them growing in water like this if you want to. And then I always like to mention pest management with any care video that I do because it's not something that I think, especially for beginners, that you think about that you're getting into. So there's a couple things you want to have on hand in my experience. Now you can create your own home remedies if you want to, but there's two items or two products that I recommend, and it doesn't have to be any specific brand. The first one is insecticidal soap. These will kill off any insects on the leaves of your plant. And it's fine typically for any kind of houseplant that you have. Always test a little bit of the leaf, see how it responds to it. And this will, like I said, kill any insects on your plant. So if you're seeing mealybugs, thrips, spider mites, this is really the best thing to use for spider mites. The other product I recommend that I don't have on hand is called systemic granules. And I think depending on where you are in the world, some places don't have systemic granules, but here in the US, you can get them on Amazon. And systemic granules are a lifesaver, and you put them into the soil and you just put them directly into the soil and then water your plant. And then you want to kind of keep up with it. The instructions on the back, I can't remember the exact number, but every couple months you want to kind of replenish the soil with the systemic granules. And they have an active ingredient that kills off the insects on the plant, and it absorbs that active ingredient, and then the insects will absorb that ingredient when they like munch or suck on the plant. And it's the only thing in my experience that has gotten rid of thrips, mealybugs. It doesn't really help with spider mites, but it does help with fungus gnats. So I'm a big proponent of mosquito bits, a product called mosquito bits for fungus gnats, and it really works well. However, I've been noticing since I've been using systemic granules, I don't have to use mosquito bits either because it's gotten rid of the mosquitoes or the fungus gnats for me. Which makes sense because the fungus gnats kind of breed in the soil, and with the systemic granules being in the soil, it eradicates them. But keep in mind, if you're using any kind of beneficial insects, systemic granules will eradicate those as well as the not beneficial insects. So I used to use beneficial insects, but because I had so many houseplants, I ended up having to use systemic granules. And like I said, they were a saving grace for my collection, which I almost lost all my plants to thrips. So that's really everything that you need to know to make your spider plant thrive. We have a very knowledgeable plant community, so please feel free to leave your tips and tricks in the comments, not for myself only, but for everybody. And if you like plant videos, feel free to subscribe so episodes show up in your newsfeed. We also have an amazing community on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. If you're interested in more plant care topics, I have a lot of them in my Houseplant Care 101 series. All right, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and that I get to see you soon. Bye.